The promise of the soul was such a welcome surprise to me. I don't like body swap or soul swap tropes because there's an inherent consent and body agency issue with it, and it can get very messy real quick. A lot of times, shows fuck up the storytelling in a way that makes me feel really uncomfortable, especially when the show obviously does not understand how violating that experience can be. Too often, the story frames it as romantic when the character kisses, touches, or even sleeps next to someone who doesn't realize they're not interacting with the person that they think they are, because the consent is given to the wrong person and in the wrong context under false circumstances. This is especially trickier when the swap happens across genders in a queer story. Suddenly, you're not just dealing with who's in whose body, you're dealing with gender identity, sexuality, and representation. A male lead kissing another guy while technically in a woman's body or vice versa can very easily be framed in ways that muddle the queerness at the heart of the story. Instead of affirming the relationship, it risks turning it into a loophole, or it's not really gay because the lead is technically a woman. Great example would be Mr. Queen. While I love that show, the whole premise of it is very problematic in a queer standpoint. It can easily feed into deception in queer relationships, ideas that BL as a genre has been trying to move away from for years. And people might say Mr. Queen is not BL. I can make my case and we can talk about it. The promise of the soul made some smart choices that kept the story from spiraling into full on disaster. First, the swap happened between two men, Chacha, the grandfather, and Shazafang, his grandson. Immediately, it dodges one of the biggest pitfalls of body swap in queer narratives, the gender loophole. It means the show wasn't trying to soften its story and is hiding behind heteronormativity. This is Taiwan after all, so I think South Korea should make a note, especially after making something like My Girlfriend is the Man. Don't even get me started on that. Second, we're not left guessing about sexuality. Shazefang is established as gay, or at the very least, comfortably bi. We did not really get confirmation, but by the absence of a woman in the narrative, we can draw a conclusion. For Sacha, we know he's been married before, and there's quite a few homophobic and heteronormative comments that I guess we can probably forgive given that he's from an older generation. I know it's not an excuse, and that's not what I'm saying. And he seems to be very accepting of his grandson's queerness. Maybe not the part where Jasefang wants to cut off his dick, but in general. Also, what's the deal with the young master, right? It was implied that he thinks his wife Yu Chan is a reincarnation of the young master. So he carries a history to a childhood crush on another boy at the very least. Having both halves of the swap anchored in queerness was a smart and intentional move, I think. And maybe the most important thing, Haiwan, the love interest, knows who's who. A lot of times, one of the leads is left in the dark until the big reveal, and everything goes well because love conquers all, apparently. The dynamic is played with transparency. Haiwan was in the know about the situation right off the bat. He knows the soul inside the body and he chooses to engage anyway. That doesn't erase all the other complexities of the situation, but it shifts the story away from trickery and deception and towards an actual emotional relationship. And Haiwan repeatedly declared that his feelings are for Sacha. He says outright that even if Zefang is in the same body, even if on the surface everything looks identical, it isn't the same. Hayuan refusing to conflate the two is a moment of clarity in a genre that usually takes advantage of blurred lines for drama's sake or misconception and miscommunication. It validates Sacha's individuality separate from Zefang's body, and it reinforces consent, and it shows the audience that attraction isn't about appearances, it's about the self inside. It made the story far less manipulative and more genuine as well. This show is jam packed with interesting themes. One of the most fascinating is the way it handles trauma through the lens of the soul swap. Take such as fear of swimming versus Zafang's claustrophobia. On his own, Sacha cannot swim. There's a deep trauma tied to water, but when he is in Zefang's body, suddenly the fear isn't there. Sacha is perfectly capable and the trauma doesn't seem to present itself. Meanwhile, Sacha inherits Zefang's claustrophobia, and anxiety so overwhelming he experiences it firsthand. And it opens up such an interesting question. Is trauma seated in the mind or is it embedded in the body? Is it memory or is it muscle? The show obviously leans into muscle memory, but it's still such a compelling thought. By splitting the characters this way, the promise of the soul plays with the idea that trauma isn't just psychological, but your body remembers the fear, especially with Safang's severe claustrophobia. This show is such a surprise, like I said. Instead of just using the swap as a shallow gimmick, they gave such a multi layered narrative. It gives each character individuality instead of just interchangeable halves of a love story. Too often in BL, characters exist as romantic archetypes, but here Sacha and Hayuan, especially Sacha, are allowed to stand on their own with fears, histories, and strengths that don't disappear just because there's a central romance. Another thing I really appreciated is how the promise of the soul handled Hayuan. The narrative doesn't try to sugarcoat his behavior or dress it up as some grand romantic gestures. He's childish and unreasonable, and the show is very clear about that. In so many BLs, those same actions would be framed as romantic possessiveness, the kind of behavior that gets excused under the logic of he's only acting out because he loves his partner so much. But here, the writing doesn't let him off the hook. The act it actually calls him out for what he is, which is immature. There's a refreshing shift. Instead of glorifying unhealthy dynamics or trying to spin emotional immaturity into devotion, the show highlights the flaws for what they are. It makes Haiwan more human, yes, but it also avoids romanticizing traits that in other series can veer dangerously close to toxic. It's a subtle but important distinction, and it shows that the writers trusted the audience to recognize growth as something earned and not just implied by the fact that the two characters are meant to be together. By giving us a lead who's messy and unreasonable without pretending that it's charming, the promise of the soul sidesteps one of the genre's most frustrating habits. It lets us root for Hayuan's journey towards maturity without having to pretend his worst instincts are so romantic, and that makes the emotional arc feel that more satisfying. And the fact that his insecurities and childishness do not just magically disappear as if emotional growth were as simple as flipping a switch. Hayuan actually hears what Sacha is saying. He understands it, and we see him making an effort to change, but it's gradual and imperfect. It acknowledges that growth is a process. It's easy to write the big emotional climax where everything gets neatly resolved, but it's much harder and more honest to show a character stumbling towards maturity. And that makes his character arc feel so much more genuine. One more element of the show that really stood out to me is the soulmate thread woven through Sacha's life. He's not given just one destined partner, but three across different stages. The young master who died when he was a child, Yu Chan, his wife, and now Hayuan. And the way the show marks these connections with the cicadas and the mole below the brow with each person gives it this almost mythical continuity, a thread that stretches across three different lifetimes. I'll admit a complete sucker for soulmates and reincarnation tropes. So here, they did not just give me one, but gave me three different soulmates. But what I find more fascinating about the soulmate stories isn't just the romance, it's the tension between fate and choice. Are you drawn to a person because you are destined to be with them, or are you destined to be with them because you're drawn to them? The show raises the question, is Sacha willing to accept Hayuan as a man because he believes him to be you chance reincarnation, or does he accept him because of the person he actually is? That ambiguity is what makes the soulmate angle so compelling. It doesn't just hand wave away the complexity of queer love, it deepens it. Because here's the real question, where do we stand on queerness when destiny decides you're meant to be together? On one hand, the soulmate trope can feel affirming. Your love is so powerful, it transcends lifetimes, bodies, and circumstances. But on the other hand, it risks undercutting the queerness if the narrative suggests Sacha only accepts Hayuan because he believes he's tied to Yuchan's soul. That framing can unintentionally slip into it's not really a man he loves, it's the reincarnation of his wife. And if that's the case, does the story still affirm Sacha's queerness, or does it sidestep it under the cover of destiny? Anyways, we're moving on from that. The highlight of the show, I think, is Hana and Haru. Finally, a GL couple I can get behind with. Haru can step on me and I will say thank you. I'm such a sucker for strong, commanding femininity. Haru being a girl boss and being so sweet to Hana just made my day. Honestly, it gave me flashbacks to Shadowhunters and the Sealy Queen, if you're familiar. That same mix of elegance, danger, and unapologetic power. Except this time, she's queer, and I would happily serve at her feet. There's something so satisfying about seeing a female character allowed to be magnetic and intimidating without the narrative punishing her for it, and making her gay is just perfection. Hannah and Haru have such a small role in the show, but they dominated that space. That bar is their kingdom, and the rest of us mere humans are servants. We're just NPCs. They are so compelling and stylish. I need a spin off, like right now. I need a spin off of just them. Okay, so moving to the one last point before I wrap this up, because this one is a little harder to ignore. Sacha is technically speaking a 69-year-old soul living in his grandson's 20-year-old body. And meanwhile, Hayuan is the same age as that grandson. So, yeah, not exactly the most comfortable pairing if you sit and think about it too long. Now, can we excuse that with the soulmate framing? Personally, I can. The show leans heavily on the reincarnation angle to smooth out the edges, and if you buy into soulmate logic, which I do, love transcends lifetimes, love finds its way no matter the vessel. It's easier to roll with it. And honestly, I've seen worse tropes in yaoi. Mitsuya Sensei's planned feeding, if anyone watched it, that's like more than 20-year age gap between the two leads, and the show is perfectly good. At the end of the day, it's going to depend on your threshold as a viewer. If the age gap dynamic breaks the immersion for you, no amount of soulmate symbolism will patch it up. But if you can accept that as part of the reincarnation trope, a narrative device meant to underline how love persists across bodies and time, then you'll probably enjoy the show for what it is. For me, it didn't ruin the series, but I can see why it might be a sticking point for some. So do with that what you will. This video is getting longer and longer. The Promise of the Soul is such a gem. Given my dislike for soul swap and body swap trope, soulmate tropes gives us the possibility that love is both destiny and choice, that reincarnation and recognition might guide you to someone, but it's still your decision to embrace them for who they are here and now. And that to me is a far richer take on the soulmate trope than the usual we're fated, therefore we're together. What do you think? Comment down below. Don't forget to check my other BL reviews. I also did a review on My Stand In and Century of Love. Both have Soul Swap and Soulmate on it. Drink your water, stay hydrated. Bye bye.